All right, so today we're going to dive into some really fascinating perspectives on marriage.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be exploring this sermon by Elder Wayne Card
Okay.
from the Kissimmee SDA Church, and it's all about a husband's role in a Christian marriage. And
It's interesting because he's an elder, right?
right,
He's not the pastor.
exactly.
So it's sort of like a different perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like getting that wisdom from like a seasoned guide within the community itself, not like the ordained leader.
Yeah, and he doesn't, like you said, he's a seasoned guy. He kind of jumps right into the
Safety nets.
challenges that modern marriages face.
Yeah.
Um, and even shares this like really poignant story about this woman who just lost her husband after 39 years of marriage. And it's just like to talk about setting the stage for a discussion on long-lasting commitment.
Yeah.
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 It really sets the tone for what he wants to focus on, which is this idea of the husband modeling his love after Christ's love for the church.
Okay, so you might be thinking like, okay, so just be nice to your wife, but it goes way deeper than that.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about this idea of cruciform love.
Right.
And I know that might sound kind of like theological and maybe even a little intimidating,
Sure.
but just stick with us here.
Well, and it's such a powerful image, right? Like cruciform literally means shaped like a cross.
Right.
It's highlighting the sacrifice,
Yeah.
the selflessness.
Yeah.
Those are the characteristics of Christ's love for the church. And that's what he believes should be the defining quality of a husband's love for his wife.
Yeah. It's a high bar for sure. He's basically saying, like, forget the rom-com version of love.
Right.
This is about, like, deep spiritual commitment that goes so far beyond just, like, the superficial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you think, huh.
Absolutely. And I think what's so helpful is he doesn't just leave it there, this big idea of cruciform love.
Yeah.
He breaks it down into three key aspects for husbands:
Okay.
sacrifice, substitution, and suffering.
And he doesn't just like throw these words around lightly either. He
Right.
gives like really concrete examples.
Mm.
Like he says husbands should be willing to give up their wants even when it means not getting their way, or staying strong and devoted even when it seems like no one's even noticing their efforts.
Yeah.
It's like heavy stuff.
It is. He's challenging husbands to step into Christ's shoes,
Wow.
to mirror that willingness to put others before themselves, even when it's difficult.
Yeah. And this is where I think it gets even more interesting
Okay.
because he doesn't shy away from the fact that like embodying this kind of love, it can lead to some pretty powerful transformation.
Yeah.
Not just in the marriage, but in the man himself.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
He seems to believe that a man striving to live out this kind of love, he becomes this force for positive change in his family,
All right.
his community, even beyond.
Yeah, and he even tells this amazing story about this one man who went through this huge transformation through faith
Okay.
and how it like completely impacted his wife.
And I think that story is so important because it really highlights this idea that,
What's that?
it's not about forcing change on your spouse, right?
Right.
It's about your own personal growth, inspiring change in others.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the importance of patience and communication in a marriage.
Absolutely. And speaking of communication,
Yes.
he gets really real about that too. He
Oh,
doesn't just say like, oh, communication is important.
Right.
He gives these like really relatable examples.
Yeah.
Like how many of us have gotten into an argument over directions?
Oh, yeah.
He uses that as like a starting point to talk about how even these small disagreements can totally escalate
Totally.
if you're not communicating effectively.
Right. And what I think is so fascinating is how he connects that back to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
He's saying if you're letting the Holy Spirit guide your words,
Okay.
you're less likely to get caught up in like being right all the time.
Right.
And more focused on actually understanding your partner.
Yeah. It's like choosing empathy over ego.
Totally.
Which is way easier said than done.
Absolutely. And it's
I-
not just about talking either.
Right.
He's also a big believer in the power of prayer in a marriage.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that a lot.
Yeah?
He even encourages husbands to pray for their wives, even when they're frustrated, even when they're feeling distant.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, like, before you even try to, like, fix things yourself,
Right.
take it to a higher power.
Exactly. Create that space for healing and understanding
Yeah.
through that connection with something bigger than yourselves.
Yeah. And you know what that reminds me of?
Like that.
Another point he makes about the difference between, like, demanding respect
Okay.
and earning respect through your actions.
Right. Because, when you first hear a sermon about a husband's role,
Yeah.
you might just assume it's going to be all about, being the head of the household
Right, the traditional sense.
in a very traditional sense.
Yeah,
But he kind of flicks that script a little bit.
he
He
does.
even acknowledges that a lot of men might bristle at the idea of like not being in charge.
Right.
But then he brings it back to the example of Christ,
Yeah.
who, even though he had ultimate authority, chose a path of humility and service.
It's like he's challenging those old school ideas of what it means to be a man.
Right.
You know, that whole strong and silent thing.
Yeah.
He's saying true strength comes from serving others,
Mm-hmm.
not controlling them.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful message,
And,
especially in today's world, because let's face it, we are bombarded with messages that tell men they need to be dominant and assertive.
right.
But he's offering a different path,
Totally.
one that's rooted in love and empathy and selflessness.
It makes you wonder how different our world would be if more men embraced that kind of leadership.
And remember, he's not just talking about some abstract concept here.
Yeah.
He gives that really compelling example of the man who's living a pretty destructive life
Oh, yeah.
before he found faith.
And how that transformation, like, completely impacted his family, especially his wife, who had been so hurt by his actions for so long.
Exactly, and it's proof that it's never too late to change.
Right.
And that even small changes can have these huge ripple effects.
Yeah. And speaking of change, he
Yeah.
keeps coming back to this idea of transformation throughout the whole sermon.
Yes.
It's like he's saying this isn't just like a one and done kind of deal.
Right.
This is an ongoing journey. It's about constantly striving to be a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
For your spouse, for your family,
For yourself.
for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, thinking back to the person who recorded this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I can see how this message could be both like challenging and incredibly inspiring at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like he's saying the work you do on yourself,
Yeah.
on your marriage,
Mm-hmm.
it has this power to change the world around you.
Absolutely. It
Sure.
speaks to that fundamental belief that we all have the capacity for growth and transformation.
Yeah.
And that by embracing our faith and striving to live by its principles,
Right.
we can make a real difference.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it like that.
Yeah. It really makes you think about the impact we can have, you
Yeah.
know, even in our like everyday lives and Elder Card.
Mm-hmm.
He ties this idea of transformation back to the family
Mm-hmm.
in this like really powerful way.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of a house,
Oh, wait.
comparing a husband's role to the foundation.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Because it really drives home the point that, like, a strong, stable family,
Right.
it needs that solid base.
Yeah.
And he's not just talking about, like, bringing home a paycheck or
Yeah.
mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
He's talking about spiritual leadership.
Exactly. He's basically saying, like, if you want your family to thrive,
Yeah.
to, like, weather the storms of life,
Yeah.
you need to be that source of strength and guidance.
Right.
And that starts with your own spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. And he's realistic about it, too.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that this kind of transformation, it's not easy. It
Right.
takes time. It takes effort.
It takes work.
It takes a whole lot of grace.
Yeah. It's a journey.
It is.
And like any journey, there can be bumps in the road, you know,
Right.
detours, maybe even a few wrong turns. But
Totally.
he keeps emphasizing that you don't have to go it alone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's a big believer in the power of couples supporting each other,
Yeah.
praying for each other, encouraging each other along the way.
And he even addresses the wives directly at one point,
Oh, that's interesting.
which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, he's not just putting all the responsibility on the husband,
Right.
you know?
It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
He reminds everyone that marriage is a two-way street.
Mhm.
He urges wives to be open and honest with their husbands about their needs and their desires.
Yeah.
But to do so with patience and understanding
Right.
is about working together, communicating effectively,
Right.
and constantly striving to create a stronger bond.
Yeah. And that brings us to, like, Elder Card's final point,
Okay.
which I found, like, incredibly moving.
Yeah.
He reminds the husbands that they have this amazing opportunity
Okay.
to empower their wives.
Interesting.
And I don't mean like in a controlling way,
Right.
but to help them become the best versions of themselves.
That's beautiful.
It's such a beautiful message.
It is.
He's basically saying, like, by loving your wife well,
Yeah.
by supporting her dreams and aspirations, you're not diminishing your role as a husband.
Right.
You're actually enhancing it.
You're creating a space where both of you can flourish.
Exactly. And isn't that what it's all about?
Right.
Creating a marriage that's built on mutual respect,
Mm-hmm.
love, and support. You know, a partnership where both people feel seen and valued
Absolutely.
and empowered.
And that's a powerful message that extends, I think, far beyond the walls of the church.
Totally.
It's a blueprint for creating stronger, healthier relationships
Yeah.
in all aspects of our lives.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into Elder Card's sermon,
Yeah.
it's clear that he's offering a challenging
Mm.
yet like incredibly hopeful vision of marriage.
Yeah.
One that's rooted in faith and sacrifice and this like unwavering commitment.
Absolutely.
And he kind of leaves us with this question that I think we can all reflect on no matter like where we are in our own
Yeah.
journeys. If we strive to embody that kind of Christ-like love,
Yeah.
how might it impact not only our relationships but also the world around us?
That's something to think about.
It is.